Esteemed members of the court, welcome back to the Tactical Verdict, the channel where we play games of their hardest difficulty and judge them based solely on the proficiency of their combat systems. On trial today is Shin Megami Tensei V, and before we pass it to our defense attorney, let's take a look at the rating scale. Games with boring, dull, and brainless combat will be labeled I condemned, tactically weak. Games that display brief glimmers of a tactical backbone but ultimately wind up spineless will be labeled I condemned, tactically weak. Games that have the tactical mindset of a sergeant but lack the wisdom of a general to see it fully realized will be labeled I awarded, a tactical treat. And finally, games that feature so much tactical diversity and build options that it would make even a theory crafter tremble at the lips will be labeled I crowned with the prestigious rating that we here call a tactical feast. Let us see how Shin Megami Tensei V fares. I'll see you in court.
What is there to say about Shin Megami Tensei V? Well, for one thing, it has brought about a revelation for me, and it's that I realized that I love the creature collector genre. I just hate Pokemon and what it's become these days. The last creature collector game that I played that I enjoyed was Pokemon Diamond and Pearl all the way back on the Nintendo DS. And I gotta say, once I started playing SMT V all these years later, I remembered just how much I love the formula, and in SMT V this formula contains so many more ingredients than the Pokemon franchise, and it's mostly due to the robust fusion system that SMT V has to offer. So what is fusion? Well, fusion is the process of combining two monsters together in order to get a new, stronger monster. And the variety of different fusions here that is on offer is absolutely astounding. One demon can pair with probably 10, 15, 20 other ones to give you completely different outcomes. And what's really cool here is that the skills of the monsters you are fusing can be transferred over to the new monster that you are trying to create. And in addition to that, all the stat boosts that you have put on your monsters before fusing them will also transfer over. And this is just really nice if you're keeping some demons in your party for like an extended period of time, maybe across 10 levels or so. As long as they're getting regular stat boosts, and maybe you're even giving them what's called simple demon boxes or lavish demon boxes. These are items that you can give to your monsters in the haunt to level them up and further their stats. So this is really nice because when you do decide to finally let go of a monster, because I have trouble letting go of some of these guys after I've been with them for so long and I've been building them up. But once you finally decide to let them go in your heart and fuse them, the stat boost will transfer over, which is a huge bonus. And then the other really neat mechanic are essences. So essences are these essentially demon spirits that you can find throughout the world, or you can acquire through completing side quests. And what this allows you to do is to transfer any of the skills in the skill tree of that monster essence over to any monster of your choosing. So you can really finely tune how your monsters turn out. And what's really nice is that you can do this process over and over. You can get a skill from one essence and transfer it over to your monster, and then that will become their new active skill pool. And then if you decide to use another essence to add more skills, the skill that you learned from the previous essence will still be in your monster's skill pool. So you can essentially stack essences back to back to get literally the perfect monster and exactly the moves that you want on them. And I don't want to compare to Pokemon again, but I simply have to. Because what sets SMT V apart from Pokemon is that there is no point in the game where you stop fusing monsters and evolving them into a new, stronger monster. And you are doing this all the way up to endgame and even in endgame itself. And I don't know about you guys, but the excitement with Pokemon for me was always tied to the idea of evolution. I was always so excited as a kid when my monsters evolved and changed. They looked different, they had new movesets. And then, there's a time in Pokemon where essentially your party, if you're not collecting any new Pokemon, they just stop evolving entirely. And then maybe they learn like one or two moves way later down the line. But honestly, it gets so boring for me after they reach those final stages that it was hard for me as a kid to really even complete some of these Pokemon games because I would play them so much, take a break, and then when I would go back, I'd be like, you know what, I kind of just want to start from the beginning again and get that, that little evolution dopamine tick in my brain, whatever that is. And in SMT 5, this process never ends, and it's really one of the most compelling reasons to pick up and play this game. Another thing that's really cool in SMT 5 and just makes it an absolute tactical feast is that every monster has an innate skill, and this is typically a monster's main distinguishing factor. Even though there are quite a few repeats, is still a ton of variety here when it comes to innate skills. And then some demons can also have a unique skill, which is really cool because this is a skill that is only available to them. Literally no other demon in the game can obtain these unique skills. So if one of these happens to be really strong for whatever you're trying to build, you can keep these guys around and that skill will still be really powerful because these unique skills usually are. For example, I have this little fox guy called Siren up in my party, and I've literally only kept him around so I can pop a skill that he has called Cautious Cheer, which is a unique skill to him, and it raises your party's defense, accuracy, and evasion all in one skill. So this is absolutely huge, and it's the only reason I'm keeping this monster around. And I found this really cool because this means that even low-level monsters can still have a place in your party, even if it's just because they have one skill that is really good and that you want to use, especially if it's one that kind of works with a build that you're going for. So how does combat function and flow in SMT 5? Well, at its very core, just like Pokemon, SMT 5 is all about finding out your enemy's weakness and exploiting it as often as you can. And it's actually quite astounding that a game that really does just boil down to knowing a target's weakness still feels as deep and engaging as SMT 5 does. But here's the thing about Shin Megami Tensei V, is that a lot of the tactics and the strategy exist outside of combat, where you're fusing demons, you're maximizing their stats, you're learning skills from essences, you're trying to find synergies within your team while also making sure that they're diverse enough to cover any elemental weakness that you might run across when you're out in the field. And the crazy part is that the player is going to have to keep adapting their strategy, because in order to get these new monsters without spending an exorbitant amount of money, you're going to have to fuse two of the demons you are already using in order to get that new one, and then all of a sudden your party composition has completely changed. And if you do this multiple times with multiple different demons, you're going to have to try to come up with a whole new setup, because these newer monsters are stronger and more powerful, yes, but the team setup that you had before doesn't exist anymore. So you're constantly adapting on the fly in this game, which is what keeps it so engaging, and which is why combat feels so satisfying, because all this preparation is finally paying off. All that being said, when you are in combat, there is still a good deal of tactical decision making, outside of just hitting an enemy's weakness. And especially if you play this game on hard mode, which, side note, is not for the faint of heart. This is a hard game. This is not Pokemon early game where you can kind of just get by. You have to engage with all these systems if you wish to be successful. So let's get into how the combat flows. So as previously mentioned, your primary focus when in combat is to hit an enemy's weakness as much as possible. With, reason number one being that if you hit an enemy's weakness, you're going to be doing more damage than anything else. But more importantly, hitting an enemy's weakness, and keep in mind a weakness can also be a status ailment, not just an elemental weakness, or landing a critical hit on the enemy will give you an extra player action point. So at the beginning of every battle, provided that you have 3 demons on the field, you'll start with 4 action points. Pretty good, right? No, it is not. It's never ever enough, and in this game it's definitely not enough, with the max action points that you can take being 8. So you can take this base 4 number and get it up to 8, and here are some of the ways that you can. The first way you can get an extra action point is hitting an enemy's weakness, as stated before, whether that's elemental or an ailment weakness. And you'll notice here that the blue icon on the leftmost side, which starts sort of grayed out, will sort of get this light blue highlight when you hit this enemy's weakness, which is how you know that you've extended your player action. And what this allows you to do is essentially perform 2 actions for the price of one of these blue icons. Because if you were to execute any other move or action that did not actually trigger a weakness or another action that would give you that extra highlighted turn, that leftmost icon would then be consumed and lost to you. Now, aside from hitting an enemy's weakness, you can also gain an extra player action point by landing a critical hit, deciding to pass your turn to one of the next demons in your active party, or if you decide to change one of your active demons out for one that sits in the stock. I really cannot stress enough how much I love the action point system in SMT V, and I'm so thankful that the pass and change actions provide those extra action points, because honestly, without that, if it was just hit the weakness, get an extra turn, I probably would have bounced off this game really fast, because that's simply not enough for me. Now that we've gone over the action point system, let's go over what the player can actually do in combat. So the first option in the battle UI is the skill list. So the player character, the Nahobino, and all his demons can learn up to 8 skills. Once you actually, learn the required miracles to unlock those skill slots. And that does not count the basic attack that every demon has. But outside of that, you will have 8 skills. You'll only see 4 here listed because there are also passive skills that you can add to your demon. So obviously they're not going to show up on this list. Your next possible option in the battle UI is items. And I have to say that there really are no bad items in this game. Everyone has its use. And the ones that are especially useful are all the elemental gems, which you can purchase from the Cadaver's Hollow. Essentially, these let you just target an enemy's elemental weakness via an item, which can be really useful, especially if you're lacking some demons in your party that target a specific elemental weakness. And then the other crucial items in this game are all these dampeners. So you can see here we have Dark Dampener, Light Dampener, Force Dampener, Physical Dampener, etc. And what these do is they allow you to nullify a specific element or physical attack, depending on the item, for your whole entire party for one turn. And being able to do this for a lot of these boss fights is absolutely crucial, as it'll, 1, mitigate all the damage entirely that they're doing to you if you accurately predict what the boss is going to do, and 2, it will help to break an enemy's turn. So if an enemy were to hit you with a single target or an AoE attack that you were able to fully block, then that enemy would lose 2 player actions. And what's even cooler is that if you have a monster that's able to absorb a specific element, which you can see here by this little whirlpool icon in the resistance chart, if you were to be targeted by that element, the enemy player would lose 4 player actions, which in this game is pretty much enough to completely destroy their turn and send it right back to you, the player. And you might be thinking, this sounds overpowered, right? I mean, you can get up to 8 player actions before the enemy even has a chance to go. You can absolutely cripple their turn if you're able to nullify or block the element that they're targeting you with. But here's the thing, is that the enemies function under the exact same system that you do. So if they land a crit, or if they target one of your weaknesses, they will also gain an extra player action. And in this game, that can kind of start to steamroll, and it will absolutely cripple you, and you'll be seeing the loading screen if you're not keeping that in mind. Now, the third option on the battle UI is Guard, and as expected, it mitigates damage, but it's especially effective to pop on the Nahobino, because in this game, if the player character dies, your main character, it's game over. And then the other thing to keep in mind about Guard is that it does not produce an extra player action. So I don't use it very often, but if I do, I'm probably going to use it on the Nahobino, because like I said, if he dies, it's game over. Then there's the fourth option on the list, which is the talk option. You can talk to any demon that you see in this game, provided, it's not like a scripted encounter or like a boss battle. And if you're successful in the negotiation, you can recruit said demon into your party, as long as you have the active party space. And a really neat little addition is that if you talk to an enemy monster while having that same monster type in your party or in your stock, you'll get neat little outcomes, like a monster leaving entirely because he's like, hey man, you have one of my buddies with you, I'm going to leave you alone for now, and the battle will just simply end. Or they might give you an item or some Maka, which is like the gold, the currency in this game. So that was a really neat addition. The next thing that a player can do, the fourth item on the battle UI, is the change option. This is how you just swap your demons in and out of combat. You can adopt your strategy on the fly. Like I said, the change action does not consume one of those press turn icons unless you've already kind of filled it up with that blue extra turn. Then it will go away after 2 actions. The fifth option on the list is escape. This is almost entirely not worth using. The items in this game are amazing. Use the smoke bomb. This just lets you get away from combat without any chance of failure, because if you fail to escape, you could literally just get wiped. And if you haven't saved maybe in the past 20 minutes, which make sure you're saving a lot in this game, because if you do not get the initiative, you can get absolutely wiped, because enemies are under the exact same rule structure as the player, so they can also get extra player actions if they're hitting your weaknesses or if they're landing critical hits. So you can get wiped very easily in this game, which is actually really cool and really scary. And then the last option in the battle UI is the pass option. This simply passes your turn onto the next active demon in your party. And this also grants you an extra player action and allows you to kind of, adapt to whatever the heck is happening in these fights. And the last option that a player can take in battle exists also inside the skill menu, but it is for when the Magatsuhi gauge is full. This is essentially your ultimate attack, and every demon, including your character, will have their own Magatsuhi skill that they can use, provided that you found the correct talismans, or I think they're called periaps, if I'm saying that right, which allow you to execute those Magatsuhi skills. Now, since there's just so much going on in this game, so many different build options that are available to you, that it would take me hours and hours to just try to go over everything. I literally could not get to it. I think it's best to just kind of show you some examples of some of the builds that you can have, and just how deep this game can get. Even though, yes, it does boil down essentially to just hitting the weakness, it's so much more than that. So let's take a look at this party setup that I have. I have the main character, the Nahobino, who's always in the party, by the way. You cannot switch him out. And then I have these other demons. So I have Cyrenup. And why am I keeping Cyrenup in my party? Well, it's because he has one simple skill. It's called Cautious Cheer, and this is one of those unique skills that I was talking about earlier, where literally no other demon in the game except for Cyrenup can learn this ability. And what this does is it raises your defense, accuracy, and evasion of all your active party members by 1 rank for 3 turns. And then I would say the other useful thing I do have on him, this is just supporting that unique ability, it's Boon Boost. This lets the user's buff and debuff skills last 1 extra turn. And the party you're looking at right here, this is always my first turn startup party, and I do this because of the defensive options that it provides. So let's take a look at an encounter with a brand new demon that I've never seen before and see how it plays out. The first thing I'll do is I'll go into the item list and select the spyglass and pop it on the demon right away, so we can see exactly the moves that they can perform and exactly what they're weak and resistant to. And here we can see this demon does physical and fire attacks, and he has 1 self buff, and he's weak to ice and fully resistant to fire and light. Now that we know exactly what the enemy can do, the turn passes over to Cyrenup, who pops Cautious Cheer, which raises accuracy, defense, and evasion by 1 rank, but for 4 turns because of that Boon Boost passive that we have him equipped with. Then the turn passes over to Arahabaki, and he casts Debilitate on the demon, which lowers their defense, accuracy, and attack by 1 rank for 3 turns. And now we only have 1 player action left, so I decide to pass with Yamada no Orochi, go back to Rain, who then guards, because this is kind of the first step in a prep for a longer fight. And now the turn passes over to the enemy demon, who pops a buff on himself to raise his attack, and then he targets Yamada no Orochi with a fire attack. But since Yamada is fully resistant to fire, he blocks it, it breaks the enemy's turn, and all of a sudden it's back to the player's turn. Now that it's our turn again, because I, the Nahobino, do not have any ice skills learned, and I don't have any proficiency with that, I decide to go into the items and pop an ice gem on the demon, so that I can do some damage, hit his weakness, and get that extra player action. And now it's Cyrenup's turn again, and normally if this was a harder fight, I would pop another Cautious Cheer to get that double buff on there for 4 turns, but since I'm not super worried about this fight, I decide to switch him out for a more offensive option. And I decide to switch him out for the Naho Biho, who is really strong when it comes to ice attacks, and this is what the demon is weak to, which is why I'm throwing him in here. And you'll notice that because of Arahabaki's innate skill, Affable Hospitality, the Naho Biho comes into battle with the exact same support buffs that are present on Arahabaki. Which is why he has +1 defense and +1 evasion. And you're probably saying, what do you mean? He has +2 defense. But that's only because of a miracle that adds a random stat buff to a demon that you swap into combat. So that just happened to stack with that. And now it's Arahabaki's turn again. And I'm going to again cast Debilitate on the demon to make sure all his stats are lowered to the maximum. And now it's Yamada no Orochi's turn. And as you can see here, he has an innate skill called Brewing Storm, which allows the switched ally's next strength-based attack to be 100% accurate and guaranteed critical. And so what I like to do with him is I like to change him out for a very specific demon. And that demon is Hecatoncheires, which is quite a mouthful. I hope I said that right. And Hecatoncheires has 2 moves that I really like to use a lot. One is Severing Bite, which deals heavy damage, and it hits for an insane amount if you hit a critical hit, which this pairs really nicely with Yamato no Orochi's innate skill, which guarantees a critical hit. And that's probably the option I should have went with here for this clip, but instead I went with Rampage, which does 2 to 5 medium physical attacks to random foes, and it has really low accuracy. And the reason why I popped this off is because if I do get 5 hits, it might actually do more damage than Severing Bite. And even though it says low accuracy, the accuracy doesn't matter because this attack is going to be 100% accurate, and that's all thanks to Yamada no Orochi's innate skill. Then it goes back to the enemy's turn. He casts another attack buff up and tries to hit Hecatoncheires. Jesus Christ, I cannot say that freaking name. And he does terrible damage to him, mostly because, he keeps buffing himself, but we also just keep debuffing him with Arahabaki, so he's really getting nowhere. And now, once again, it's back to the player turn, and I decide to swap Arahabaki out for something that's actually going to do some damage to this boss, because now that I'm buffed up and he's debuffed, I'm ready to go full aggro. And so I swap Huang Long in for Arahabaki. And with that, the turn passes to Nahobino, and as you can see, we have that Magatsuhi gauge full, so I decide to pop the Omagatoki critical skill, which guarantees critical hits for all magic or strength-based attacks. So now, no matter what I hit the demon with, it's always going to be a critical hit, so as long as I'm not hitting one of their resistances or full resistances that would break my turn, I'll be landing critical hits, doing good damage, and getting that extra player action. And because this was a Makatsuhi skill that we just used, the Nahobiho still gets a turn, and so with him, I pop a skill called Jack Tempest, which, look at this frickin' skill. It's just so cool to look at. I'm gonna let this one play out. Then the turn passes over to Huang Long, and I decide to cast an Almighty attack, which doesn't target any specific element. This is like one of those non-elemental attacks, which is really good because it bypasses an enemy's resistances or weaknesses, as it doesn't target any of them and it cannot be blocked. And this naturally lands for a crit because of that Omagatoki effect still in action. And then the turn passes over to Hecatoncheires, who this time I do actually cast Severing Bite, because I know I'm going to land a critical hit, and look how much damage it does, upwards of 900 plus. And then with the Nahobino, I'm going to cast Wrath Tempest, which is a multi-hit physical attack, and I have +5 proficiency with physical skills, and as you can see, this does a ton of damage. And then for the last 3 turns, we're just going to spam the same skills, and you're going to see this demon gets absolutely deleted. So this is just one of many examples of a build that you can come up with. And it feels like it's completely my own. I'm sure other people have done this, but there's a lot of depth here, as you can see, and this is just one little sliver of it. I've done my best to defend Shin Megami Tensei V's combat, and now it's time to pass it over to the courtroom to see what Judge Verdict has to say.
The evidence has been submitted in defense of Shin Megami Tensei V's tactical competency, and now the time has come for the verdict. Due to robust fusion and essence systems, an endless variety of demon and team synergy options available to the player, a fantastic action point system that allows for on-the-fly decision-making, and a constant sense of progression that lasts well into the end game, I hereby declare Shin Megami Tensei V to be a tactical feast. And any fan of a creature collector must realize Pokemon for what it really is, a shell of its former self. I say, my friends, justice has been served today. And with that...
Keep my IP's name out your fucking mouth!
What was that, miss?
Keep my IP's name out your fucking mouth!
Be gone, wild witch! I'm on demon time now.